If you've just inherited an IRA and you already have a few million of your own saved for retirement, the account probably feels like icing on the cake to your nest egg. And that's great, but there's a problem buried inside it that most people don't see until it's too late. And that problem can quietly cost you six figures over time. Because the rules around inherited IRAs changed very dramatically just a few years ago. And the default way that people handle them hands a fortune back to the IRS, not because they did something wrong, but because nobody walked them through what the new rules actually require. And the tax bill doesn't show up until the deadline essentially forces it. I work with families in this exact situation, and the difference between the ones who handle it well and the ones who will get crushed by it almost always comes down to a handful of decisions made in the first year they inherited the account. Decisions that feel low stakes at the time that turn out to be worth six figures by year 9 and 10. So in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly what I would do if I personally inherited an IRA at 60 with 3 million of my own already saved. The real plan in order with the reasoning behind each move. But first, we need to understand what's actually hiding inside that account. So what is the 10-year rule for inherited IRAs and what does it actually mean? So let's start with the scenario that most people watching this are probably in. Your parents maybe passed away and they left you an inherited IRA. Or maybe you're watching this and you're expecting an inherited IRA at some point in the next few years based on your parents' age. You're a non-spouse beneficiary, which means that the old rules, the ones that let you take stretch distributions across your lifetime, no longer apply to you. Under the Secure Act, you have to drain that inherited IRA within 10 years. And the 10-year clock starts the calendar year after the year of death. So if your parent passes away in 2026, the 10-year clock starts in 2027. And every distribution, every dollar that comes out of the account is taxed at ordinary income tax rates. And if your parent had already started taking their own required minimum distributions before they passed away, you also have to take annual withdrawals in years 1 through 9 on top of emptying the account completely by year 10. And in many cases, the distributions are really mandatory from day 1 of inheriting the account. The point is, the IRS built a 10-year fuse into this account, but most people don't smell the smoke until year 9 or year 10. So why is this a different problem when you already have, let's say, $3 million? Well, if you're inheriting this with, let's say, minimal other income, it's pretty manageable. But that's probably not most people watching this video. You already have assets, investment income, maybe a pension. Maybe you're still working part-time or even full-time. Every dollar that comes out of that inherited IRA stacks directly on top of everything else that you already have. So let's put a real number on this. Let's say that you inherit a $600,000 IRA from a parent. And if you spread it evenly, let's say over 10 years, that's $60,000 a year in taxable income over that time frame. On top of $300,000 of existing income, you're looking at $360,000 of combined annual income. You're still in the 24% federal bracket if you're married, pushing into the 32% bracket if you're single. But either way, manageable. But if you do nothing for 9 years and you pull the full $600,000 in year 10, not even factoring any growth, that's $900,000 of income in a single year. At this point, you're deep into the 37% bracket, regardless of your filing status. And the difference in federal tax alone on that one decision can exceed $130,000. And that's before state taxes. That's just the federal level. So the inherited IRA doesn't feel dangerous. And that's actually what makes it dangerous. Now, let's talk about the two ways that people get this wrong. The first is waiting, doing nothing for 9 years because there's no immediate consequence. Then realizing in maybe year 9 or 10 that everything has to come out at once. The IRS doesn't send you a warning, the deadline just arrives. The second is treating it like a regular IRA, your own account on your own timeline. People forget the 10-year clock exists entirely, and they get a very unpleasant reminder in that 10th year. Either way, the outcome is the same. A household that pays far more tax than it had to because nobody built a deliberate plan. That's the whole game, controlling when and how that income gets taxed. Now, let me show you how I'd do it. Now, quick note before we get into each of the moves. If you inherit an IRA in, let's say, your mid to late 60s, and you eventually reach 70 and a half during that 10-year window, which is very likely, you gain access to a qualified charitable distribution, or QCD for short. You can send up to $110,000 a year directly from the inherited IRA to a qualified charity completely tax-free. It never touches your adjusted gross income. So if giving is already part of your plan, this is one of the most tax efficient ways to drain part of that inherited account without adding a dollar to your taxable income. And I'll come back to this later in more detail. Now, move 1, map the full 10 years before you touch anything. So before I touch a single dollar, I build the map. And I want to be clear about what I mean by that, because this is not just a planning exercise. It's diagnostic. What the map actually reveals about your situation is often the most surprising part of this whole process. And here's what most people don't realize. 2 people can inherit the exact same IRA value in the same year and have completely different optimal drawdown schedules, because the map isn't just about the inherited account. It's about your entire income picture across the next 10 years. When does Social Security start? When does your own required minimum distributions kick in? What years is your lowest income years? What years does it peak? All of that determines when you pull from the inherited IRA and how much. Same account, different lives, different plan completely. Without this map, you're playing 10 years of chess, one move at a time, with no idea what the board looks like 3 moves ahead. That sounds more like checkers than chess, or in other words, the IRS is playing chess and you're playing checkers. You underpool in the years that maybe you had room. You overpool in the years that you didn't, and you end up with exactly the income bunching that you were trying to avoid. But here's the reframe that most people do miss. The inherited IRA isn't just a problem to manage. For a lot of the families that I work with, building this map is the first time that they've ever looked at their entire retirement income picture in one place at one time. The inherited IRA forced them to really do that. And what they see, the bracket room that they just didn't know about, the IRMAA cliffs that they were quietly heading toward, the Roth conversion window that they were about to waste. These topics all integrate together, and it's often more valuable than the inherited IRA itself. And most people think that the inherited IRA is the problem. The map usually shows that it's the first thing that finally forced them to see the solution. So once you have that map, the second move is about how you use it. And this is where most of the actual savings live. Move 2, spread the withdrawals to fill brackets, not blow through them. So the strategy is somewhat simple to describe and hard to execute without a real plan. Take distributions every year, size to fill your current bracket without spilling into the next tax bracket. The math behind it is actually pretty significant. So going back to that $600,000 example, you spread across 10 years the distributions in the 24% bracket, and you pay roughly $144,000 in federal tax on those distributions. If you pull the full $600,000 in year 10 on top of $300,000 of other income, you're at $900,000 total, deep into that 37% bracket. The federal tax difference on the inherited portion alone exceeds $130,000. Same dollars, but the timing and that one decision when to take them out makes a massive difference. So at 60, with $3 million of your own money, you likely have gap years that are ideal for this. Years before Social Security starts, years before your own required distributions begin at 73 or 75. And those years are like open lanes on the highway. Most people don't realize that they have them until the traffic has already piled up. So in practical terms, you want to take more in the low income years, less in the high income years. And in 2026, the 32% bracket kicks in at a little over $201,000 for single filers, a little over $403,000 for married filing jointly. And when you're taking distributions, you want to watch those lines carefully. And you also want to start watching IRMAA 2 years before you hit Medicare age at 65, because the surcharges are based on income from 2 years prior. That means the decisions that you make at 63 show up in your Medicare premiums at 65. And in 2026, the surcharge threshold starts at $109,000 for single filers and double that, $218,000 for married couples. Just $1 over, and you owe the full IRMAA surcharge, which we'll get into a little further in a moment. Now, the after-tax proceeds from each distribution go into a taxable account, most likely, holding tax-efficient, let's say, low-cost funds, assets that produce qualified dividends and long-term capital gains rather than ordinary income tax. The money already got taxed coming out of the IRA, so there's no reason to keep generating ordinary income once it lands in the taxable account. And this is what turns a forced taxable drawdown into a controlled one. You're playing offense with a mandatory event. Now, move 3, you want to coordinate the inherited drawdown with your own Roth conversions. So here's where I see most plans fall apart when they really didn't need to, even the ones that start well in the first place. The same low income gap years that are perfect for pulling from the inherited IRA are usually also the ideal window for Roth conversions let's say on your own $3 million account. Both strategies need the same bracket room in the same years, and they're basically competing for the same space. So if you run them independently, let's say your tax preparer, your accountant handling the inherited IRA, your financial advisor telling you to do Roth conversions, but neither one knowing what the other is doing, can easily stack, let's say, 150,000 of inherited distributions on top of 150,000 of conversions, and you blow straight through the brackets that you were trying to fill. You've defeated both strategies kind of at the same time. It's kind of like trying to fill two buckets from one tap. If you're not watching both, one overflows while the other just sits empty. So this is my approach. Prioritize the inherited IRA distributions first, because the 10-year clock is forcing them regardless. Then you fill the remaining bracket room with Roth conversions. In years where the inherited distribution is smaller, then what you do is you convert more. In years where it's larger, you convert less. And at $3 million with, let's say, that $300,000 in existing income, you're likely already in the 24% bracket before a single dollar comes out of the inherited IRA. So most of this is happening probably in the 24 to 32% range, not the 10 or 12% brackets that you may have hoped for. And that's okay, because even if you drift into the 32% bracket, moving money into a Roth IRA that grows tax-free from that point forward can absolutely still be worth it long term. So the goal isn't perfect brackets. It's avoiding, let's say, the highest brackets, 35, 37%, and even the higher IRMAA cliffs. Now, here's what I would do and what typically makes the math work in your favor. The inherited IRA is forcing cash out anyways. You have to take funds out. So you use those distributions to cover the tax bill after tax on the Roth conversion. You're not coming out of pocket. The inherited account is funding its own coordination with your long-term tax reduction strategy. And here's a move at the end of the decade that most people miss entirely. Once the inherited IRA is fully emptied, usually around the 10th year, those gap years come back. The inherited income is gone. And if your RMDs haven't started yet, you may have a window of a few years with significant bracket room and no forced distributions. That is the time to convert aggressively. So plan for that window now, don't stumble into it later. So clearly the inherited drawdown and your own Roth conversions run in tandem. Now, the last move is about managing everything that strategy produces as one system. Move 4, manage the stacking income as one system. So by this point in the decade, you have a lot of income landing on the same tax return at the same time. You have the inherited distributions, your own Roth conversions, maybe you have a taxable brokerage account with investment income, eventually Social Security, maybe even a pension, and eventually your own required minimum distributions. It all stacks. And that stack has to be managed as one system, not a collection of separate accounts, each doing their own thing. And let me make IRMAA concrete, what I mentioned earlier, because this is where I see people get quietly hurt. Say that you're 63 and you take an $80,000 distribution from the inherited IRA in a year where your other income is already at $200,000. That combined $280,000 crosses the married IRMAA threshold for 2026, which sits at $218,000. So you don't feel it immediately, but 2 years later at 65, when you enroll in Medicare, your premiums are based on that 2026 income. You're not paying a surcharge that you don't remember earning, potentially $23,000 to $4,000 more per year as a couple, for as long as that income year follows you. That's the leak that this strategy is designed to prevent. So one distribution taken in the wrong year costs you for years afterward. Now, as the taxable account builds from the inherited IRA proceeds, where you hold different assets matters more and more. This is asset location. Typically, growth assets belong in a Roth because it's tax-free forever. So you want that compounding effect with growth assets to happen in that account. Fixed income belongs in the traditional IRA because the income that gets spit out from the investments doesn't get taxed until you take funds out. And then tax-efficient bonds and tax-efficient low-cost equity funds typically belong in the taxable brokerage account because qualifying dividends and long-term gains are not taxed at ordinary income. So getting this right across all three buckets compounds quietly over the decade in a way that really does add up significantly. And now back to the QCDs, because this is where they do really shine. Once you hit 70 and a half, you can send a little over $110,000, so $111,000 a year directly from your IRA to a qualified charity, completely tax-free. It never hits your adjusted gross income, which means it doesn't push you into a higher IRMAA tier, doesn't increase how much of your Social Security is taxable, and it satisfies your own future RMDs without those dollars flowing through your tax return. So if giving is part of your life already, this is one of the cleanest tools in retirement tax planning. And it becomes especially powerful when you're managing stacking income from, let's say, an inherited IRA at the exact same time. So the thread that's connecting all of it, you're not managing 4 separate accounts. You're managing one income picture. And when you see it that way, the decisions get cleaner, the leaks get smaller, and the plan actually works together. So if you want to see how all of this maps to your specific numbers, the inherited IRA, the Roth conversion timeline, Social Security claiming strategies, IRMAA management, you can use the link in the description to schedule time with my team, and we'll have a deeper discussion around building your specific plan. So what does the complete plan look like, and why do most people not get there? So let me bring it all together. What you want to do is map the full 10-year drawdown before touching a single dollar. That's what I would do. Every year is essentially planned. You know what's coming out, what it does to your income, and what it costs before you start doing really anything. You want to spread the withdrawals likely across all 10 years, taking more in the low gap years and less when other income is running higher. You stay under the bracket thresholds and IRMAA tiers rather than just blindly blowing through them. Coordinate the inherited distributions with your own Roth conversions so that they're filling the same bracket room efficiently instead of stacking on top of each other. And you plan in advance for the conversion window that opens up after the inherited account is gone once it's depleted. You manage the stacking income, your IRMAA, Social Security's taxation, QCDs, asset location, as one coordinated system across the entire decade. That's the plan. That's the 4 moves that I would make. 1 decade, 1 coordinated system. So why do most people not actually do this? Well, not because it's too complicated. There are intricacies to it because the mistakes are invisible. The IRS is not knocking on your door telling you what to do. And usually people find out too late before they can fix it. Or spread across the decade as thousands and, let's say, unnecessary Medicare surcharges that nobody connected back to a single distribution taken in the wrong year. So the families that handle this well aren't necessarily more financially sophisticated. I mean, maybe, but they just decided early to treat the inherited IRA as a planning event, not a windfall to deal with it later. They built the map. They coordinated the moves. They made deliberate decisions in year 1 that paid off quietly in years 6 through 10. And the ones who got it wrong, well, most of them knew something was maybe off. They didn't have a plan. They just didn't know where to start or who to trust to actually build it with them. So now that you know the 4 moves, you map the full 10-year drawdown, you spread the withdrawals to fill brackets instead of blowing through them, you coordinate the inherited distributions with your own Roth conversions, and you manage all of it as one stacking income system. I'll leave you with this. Here's the thing about an inherited IRA. The account itself is neutral. It doesn't cost you anything or save you anything on its own. What determines the outcome is whether someone builds a plan around it or doesn't. The tax code doesn't reward the people who know the rules. It rewards the people who actually implement and act on them. So if you'd like help building out that plan, one that's actually built around your specific numbers, your timeline, and your specific situation, you can use the link in the description to schedule a call with our team and learn more about our profit process at the Clark Group. We'll show you exactly how to structure the 10-year drawdown, where your bracket room is, and how to coordinate everything so that inherited IRAs end up working for you instead of against you. As always, if you're still watching up to this point, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate you tuning in. And if you are new to the channel and you found this content helpful, feel free to like and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. I will see you in the next video.